Recognizes Ranking Member Marshall.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I'll start with Dr. Goodman. Trying to understand linear assessments. When, as a physician, we give a patient medicine, we start off the lowest dose possible, and then usually you'll hit a certain dose to finally get the response you're wanting. And then I never see a linear progression to the side effects. It looks like we just steadily go up, and then suddenly there's a number that causes the side effects. And I would think, trying to apply toxicology might be the same in reverse. So do you typically use some type of a linear analysis, or is there typically drop-off points?
So right now, cancer is evaluated differently than non-cancer effects. So for non-cancer health effects, it's exactly as you say. When assessments are done, it's assumed that a minimum exposure is necessary to see any type of toxic effects, and below that exposure, those effects won't occur. Now, it's based on a regulatory context, not based on biology, this idea that if there's something that can cause cancer, one molecule of that something can cause cancer. And so they do this process called linear low-dose extrapolation, meaning obviously you can't do a scientific study of one molecule. So you take the higher doses and basically plot out on a curve what the association is between the dose of the chemical or exposure of the chemical and cancer risk. And then you extrapolate from that lowest dose down to zero, essentially assuming that there's risk down to zero. But if biologically that's not necessarily the case, particularly for certain carcinogens that have certain mechanisms. And in that case, you should do exactly as you said. You should find the exposure level, the minimum exposure level where you can increase cancer risks, and then below that, there's no evidence for an increased cancer risk.
How do you take the IRIS assessment cancer classifications and then apply them to actual human health risk? How do companies do that? The IRIS assessment cancer classifications, and then I'm trying to relate that from taking that data to human risk.
Well, I think the idea, if you're talking about cancer, so a cancer slope factor or a number is calculated. That's an estimate of what what cancer risk is associated with specific exposures. But as I said, there's this extrapolation down to low exposure levels because that can't be studied. And so by design,